How's it going, everybody? My name is Parallax Abstraction, and this is the Geek Bravado Ramble. I am recording this on Valentine's Day, actually, February 14th, 2015. It's about 11:15 in the morning. It is a snowy, bloody, freezing, tired Saturday here, so friggin' cheers, right? Oh my. And before any of you wonder why I'm doing this instead of doing something with my girlfriend today, she's actually visiting her parents in Florida for a week. So we're doing the Valentine's Day thing when she gets back. We're not big on that anyway, but just so you know, I'm not that terrible a boyfriend. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we haven't done one of these in a while. Haven't felt a burning need to do one on anything for a while. But I wanted to talk about something interesting today that's happened. Well, it's happened the last couple of days, and it involves a figure that I kind of have an attachment to as a gamer because some of his historical work, and it's been rather interesting. So I'm here to talk about Peter Molyneux, actually. And if you've been following the news the last just the last day, I guess, you've probably seen the very long, very what's the polite word, tense interview that he did with John Walker from Rock Paper Shotgun. And well, this week there's been a lot of controversy around Peter Molyneux in general because there's been some articles that have come out about GODUS, which is the kickstarted sort of spiritual successor-ish kind of thing to Populous, or Black and White, or the other God games that he's done historically. And the fact that it's very, very late. It is a fraction of the game that was promised thus far. Development on the PC version has apparently all but ceased, but the mobile, free-to-play, crappy microtransaction-ridden version has continued to thrive, apparently. And also the contest for Molyneux's last friggin' Skinner box experiment, which was the Curiosity game, the guy who won that, who was supposed to be sort of an overseeing, all-powerful god in the game world, and was supposed to get a cut of the royalties, has not only not gotten any of that because the game's not done, but he has been... basically 22 Cans, which is Molyneux's new developer, went dark on him and stopped talking to him, and he basically feels that he was screwed out of the prize that he was gotten, or that he had won anyway. And there's been a lot of question about this. Peter Molyneux, so I'm going to be talking about this in the context of people who understand the history with Peter Molyneux in the gaming community and the gaming press, but the short of it is that Molyneux has made a lot of really, really good games. Some of many people's favorite games ever: Populous, Syndicate, Dungeon Keeper, Black and White to a certain degree. And he has a notorious history for, in the pre-release press for his game, promising features and things in the game that sound incredible and rarely ever delivering on them. The games he puts out are usually not bad, but they always are a small fraction of the vision that he promised in the lead up to the game. This is sort of his industry reputation, and it's something that gamers don't necessarily like, but they've also come to accept as they're like, oh, there's Molyneux again. There are parody Twitter accounts of him and things like that as well. And one of the things that, see, I kind of like people like Peter Molyneux to a certain degree. I like people who have big, grandiose visions and who are obviously incredibly creative people and want to do amazing things. His problem is that he talks about them, his mouth writes checks his games can't cash, which I think that's actually quoting the interview. But basically, he tends to speak before he knows what's possible, and that leads to a lot of disappointment and resentment among gamers, and I think that's fair, to be honest with you. And one of the things a lot of people have said over the years, myself included, is that he's often not called out on this by the press. You know, the games press, I've had many problems with them over the years. They're well documented, but one of the problems is that they do tend to softball developers because they don't want to lose access. And one of the biggest problems that I have found is that Molyneux never tends to get, I don't want to say put in his place, but no one ever gets to him and goes like, look, man, you've got a problem with this. Why do you keep doing this? They just kind of go, oh, there's Molyneux there's Molyneux overpromising again. Ha, isn't that funny? And I don't think that does a service a good service to consumers at all. So that changed yesterday. John Walker from Rock Paper Shotgun did an interview with Molyneux, and it was done with the usual brand of Rock Paper Shotgun's smug superiority, which is something some people find endearing. I find it kind of a turnoff. I've always found that their ability to switch between kind of being goofy and kooky and also downright hostile sometimes towards their audience and their subjects is kind of off-putting. But it's kind of their thing, and it's kind of what they do, and Molyneux knew who he was talking to. But the interview, even by their standards, was incredibly hostile. Like, the first question that John Walker asked literally is, do you think that you're a pathological liar? To which I'm like, dude, what the hell? That's a little bit much, isn't it? And it really kind of was. I mean, I think, like, his objective with this was clearly to ask hard questions and take Molyneux to task for what he's done, not just historically, but especially now, because GODUS is a little bit different. This was not him taking a publisher's money and a publisher's time and overextending both. This, this is not necessary. This is more of a Double Fine situation, and I've discussed my qualms with Double Fine before on this blog, which have actually intensified more in the wake of other recent things involving them. They have a very similar problem to that he does, which is that they're very bad at managing money and time, and they tend to overpromise and underdeliver. And this is a similar situation because in the past, his games were publisher funded, which means, okay, some business person who ultimately does control the purse strings and can pull the plug, he was able to sell them on getting more money and more time. And that's fine. Those are calculated business decisions by people who have power in business situations. GODUS is different because it was kickstarted, and the problem with Kickstarter, and this is one of the reasons I backed off with it a lot lately, is that backers have very little recourse if things either don't go the way they expect, don't go the way they were promised, or indeed go south completely. They have no ownership in the business or the project. They can voice their opinion, and they have the vectors in which to do that, but they do not have any authority over the project. A publisher who is funding a game can go to Peter Molyneux and say, hey, we got the purse strings here. We don't like what you're doing. You're going to do it this way, or we're going to pull your funding. You can't do that when you're fan funded. And so this is a very different situation. And I think it's fair to take him to task on that because his overpromising and underdelivering it's different when it's your customers' money directly. But needless to say, he was extremely harsh with the way he approached this. A lot of the interview was just him quoting things Molyneux has said and done in the past. And there's nothing wrong with throwing that stuff back at somebody to ensure that they are being held to account for what they've done. And Molyneux clearly has done a lot of that and clearly became very, very flustered in the interview when he was called out on some of this stuff. He denied some of it until the quote was basically shown to him, and then he was like, oh, well, yeah, I did say that, but that's not what I really meant. But the way in which Walker approached this, I think, was overly hostile and was clearly designed to get Molyneux flustered and get him to trip over his words and say something that Walker could point to say, ha, see, I got you. And I mean, starting off an interview with "Do you think you're a pathological liar?" that's exactly what that is. It's trying to start the thing off hostile. It's trying to throw your target off balance, and that's really what Molyneux was, and this was a target. It's designed to throw him off balance so that he'll say and admit to something that can be the smoking gun. And I don't think that's cool at all. There are a million different ways that Walker could have asked that first question rather than calling him a pathological liar. He could have said, something as simple as you have a noted history for overpromising and underdelivering. He could have absolutely said something like that. Would have conveyed the same meaning, but it wouldn't have, accused Peter Molyneux, a very respected longtime industry designer, of having essentially a mental disorder, That's really not a cool thing to do to an industry professional. And I don't really care if you're Peter Molyneux or some little indie dev, even people who I think are giant douchebags like Phil Fish. I don't think that's not a cool way to start off an interview. And I don't really think, like, that's the kind of thing someone in a forum or Reddit would say. That's not something a journalistic professional, someone who would profess to be one of those, should be saying to somebody like Molyneux. I don't think that's very cool at all. But Molyneux clearly got flustered a lot throughout the interview, and by the end, he was basically accusing Walker of just saying, "You don't like my work. You just want me gone from the industry. I'm going to stop doing press because this is really what you want. You just want me to stop talking," which is rather interesting given recent events. About journalists trying to get certain people to stop talking and not have a voice. Rather pertinent, that, I would say. Anyway, but yeah, I do have a bit of a conundrum with this whole situation, very similar to Double Fine. And that's really what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to link to the interview that I'm talking about, obviously in the blog post and probably in the description below the video, because if you just watch the video, you really should read this interview for context. It is very long, but it's worth it. I think it's worth reading to get an idea of what's going on here, because it does go into Molyneux's history a lot. And as someone who grew up playing most of Molyneux's games, like I've played Populous, I've played Black and White, I played the Dungeon Keepers, I played Syndicate, and they were all very good games for the most part. Black and White I had issues with, but they were very good games. They were very creative. They were all very ambitious. And yeah, they were basically all late and all over budget, as I understand it. And a similar thing can be said about Double Fine, which we talked about before. Double Fine is notorious for being terrible at managing both their time and their money. Almost everything they do is late and over budget, but a lot of what comes out of them is generally very good, even if a lot of people don't buy it necessarily. Brutal Legend was very flawed, but I liked it. Psychonauts was incredible. Broken Age, not so sure about that one so far. I just did a video on Grim Fandango Remastered, which could have been better, but was still really cool. Stuff like that. And I don't think that, because the game development is, we talk about games as art, and if games are art, then gaming is a very creative industry. It's first and foremost. Creativity is what drives this industry. Yeah, it's a business, but it's a creative business. You need creativity to generate the product, what is going to make you the money. And I understand that creativity is something you can't force into the constraints of a typical business arrangement. Like, trying to take a creative endeavor and make it fit the mold of a traditional business is trying to put a square peg into a round hole. It really is. Because you need the best, most interesting products you can, for the most part, in order to make the money, at least among hardcore gamers. And in order to make that the best product that you can't say up front, well, this is going to take this long and cost this much money, and we're definitely not going to go over that. That's just not how art and creativity works. And one of the things that Molyneux alludes to in this interview is that Walker keeps hammering him about the fact that he's like, you've been in the industry for 30 years. How can you still not get a game done on time and on budget? And Molyneux makes the, I think, very relevant point where he says that, well, this is a different game. Every game is different. Unless you're making the same thing literally every time, you can't accurately predict what something is going to cost. You can give it your best guess and set up a contingency beyond that, but you can't offer any guarantee on what something is going to cost. And I think that's true. If you're not making something like a Call of Duty or something that's super annualized, and even then, I don't think it's an exact science, you definitely can't accurately know what something's going to cost beforehand. However, what he talks about is that they basically purposely asked for less than they knew they needed when they did their Kickstarter, because they knew if they set the budget too high, they wouldn't fund the project. And indeed, GODUS overfunded, but not by a huge amount, and it was mostly at the last minute. And this was asking for less than they actually needed. There's something I have a real problem with. If you're purposely asking for less money, because the way Kickstarter works, right, is if your project doesn't fund, you don't get any money. It's either all or nothing. And basically the idea that you're going to ask for less than what you need to make the project what you're promising, because you know if you ask for what you actually need, you probably won't get it. There's something really wrong there. That to me indicates that either your project is too big, like you've scoped it beyond your means, or like that means to me that you basically overscoped the project, because I don't think it's unfair to say that you are lying to people in that situation. If you're saying we need $500,000 to finish a game, I don't remember what GODUS asked for. It's in the interview, but because I didn't back GODUS because of Molyneux history. If you're saying we need X amount of money in order to do a project, and you know that that's not enough, that's lying to people. You're telling people that it's going to cost a certain thing to do something when you know that's not the case. And a lot of people gave Peter Molyneux shit when he was doing the project, going, this guy's a multimillionaire, why is he crowdfunding this at all? To which I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. I mean, the fact that you have a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean you have to bank your entire livelihood on one project. And the argument I always made to that was, if that's a problem for you, don't back the game. And I didn't back GODUS, not because Molyneux's a millionaire, but because I didn't trust that it would be... I thought this was going to happen, to be honest with you. What are the reasons I didn't back it? But, I don't think you can say... Like, you can say, this game needs $1 million, but we're asking for $500,000, and here's where the other half's going to come from. It's going to come from an investor. Molyneux's going to put it in himself. We actually are going to sign with a publisher. And this is the other bit of controversy, is the whole idea of crowdfunding this was that GODUS was not supposed to have a publisher, and they ended up that they did go with a publisher for the mobile versions, which is why the mobile versions have been getting all the attention and are some basically finished games, while the PC version has languished, because the PC version is still without a publisher. And he said very early on, he's like, we're doing this because we don't want a publisher telling us what to do, which is what most Kickstarter games are about. And that I get, but still, I think it's fair to say this game needs $1 million, but we're asking for $500,000, and here's where the other $500,000 is going to come from. That's not what he did. What he said is this game is going to cost, and like I said, I'm just pulling numbers here, but he said this game is going to cost $500,000, and we're asking you guys for it, when he apparently, by his own admission, knew that that was not realistic. And now the rumors going around, and he's trying to debunk this, but the rumors going around is that the GODUS team has been reduced to a skeleton crew. A guy he brought in as a lead designer, which was apparently a backer of the project, who worked for a year unpaid, but was then offered a position, has now looked at things and has said a lot of what we're promising is not realistic at all and is probably not going to happen. Molyneux is contradicting that. And he's saying that the game has a full team working on it, even though many people are within the company are saying that, I guess most of the team for GODUS has moved on to The Trail, which is his next game, which he's announced the existence of, but refused to talk about otherwise. Announcing the existence of your next game when GODUS is in a state, like, there's a classic example right there. I don't care if you didn't give any details on it. Why did you even come out and say that you're working on another game when you have a crowdfunded project that's not done yet? Like, why would you do that? Why would you? That's just throwing fuel on the fire. And this is part of what Molyneux does, is he tends to speak, he tends to speak ahead of himself. Sorry, I need more caffeine. And as someone who tends to do that myself, I can appreciate that, but I'm not asking for people's money. And it's a real weird conflict, because I can respect people who have deep creative vision and are passionate and want to talk about that. Like, one of the biggest problems I said for the longest time in the video games industry is that everything is so laden in PR. The people who talk about games, particularly big games, are hamstrung, and they're forced into a specific message, and they're like, you can talk about the following things in the following way, and that is all you can say. And it makes them sound like robots, and it makes them sound like they're not engaged and they're not really interested in the project or its fans. And it makes them look like big corporate machine types. And I've always thought that that's the wrong thing to do in a creative industry. You really need to speak to your consumers and speak to them like you're on their level. Speak to them like human beings. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them what you're doing right, why you think you're doing it right, and admit where you screwed up. I don't care if you're Peter Molyneux or Ubisoft. Just say where you screwed up. Be like, you know what, we fucked up, and here's how we're not going to do it in the future. Molyneux's problem is that he tends to say where he's fucked up, and then he keeps fucking up. On that sense, he admits where he messed up, and then he continues to do it. He doesn't seem to take any lessons from that. But at the same time, I really love the fact that the guy is so passionate, and that he doesn't say these things to boost his ego. He does come across to me as a very humble guy, and I really do think that he believes everything he says when he says it. Like, he's a big idea guy, and big ideas and big grandiose thoughts are what has taken gaming from where it began to what it is now. Is people pushing the envelope and people saying, no, you know what, we can do way better than that, and then finding ways to make it happen. I would like to think that in most creative people in this industry, their thought processes and what goes on in their heads is very much what Molyneux does. Like, I think I said that badly. I think the things Molyneux says is what most true creative video game people are thinking all the time. They're trying to think of ways to push the envelope to do better, because everybody wants to make the best game they can, and everyone would love to take every idea that they possibly have and be able to implement it and implement it well. I think Molyneux's problem is that he verbalizes all of that. He doesn't know, he has no filter to tell him what of that thought process he should tell to others and what he should keep to himself until he can implement it. And I think that's interesting, because it does give you a certain degree of insight into how the sausage is made, into how these really creative types think and process stuff. I think that's really good, but at the same time, it also constantly verbalizing it the way he does leads to disappointment. Obviously, when he doesn't deliver what he promised, when a game like Black and White or Fable or indeed GODUS is not anything like what he hyped it up to be ahead of time, gamers have a right to be disappointed in that, and gamers have a right to go, this isn't what you told me. Why are you doing this? You need to stop doing that, especially when they've put their money up front to back your vision. Because the fact that GODUS funded is proof that there's obviously a lot of people out there who still have an immense amount of respect for what Molyneux has done and want to help him make his vision a reality. And I can certainly respect that. I don't blame anyone who funded GODUS. If I had more money at the time that project was going, maybe I would have too. Who's to say? But we're nonetheless in a position now where GODUS is very late. It's a fraction of the game that it was supposed to be. Even the PC version is full of really disgusting mobile Skinner box mechanics, which nobody thought it would be. Combat isn't really there. There's no multiplayer, which is why this guy who won the Curiosity contest has not gotten anything, because the functionality that was going to enable him to do what his prize entailed is not there. And he's basically not able to participate. And to be fair, the fact that the 22 cans went dark on him, Molyneux has outright come out and said, no, we screwed up. I'm sorry. That's my fault. I will take ownership of this. I will fix it. Doesn't excuse that it happened, but he owned it. He didn't try to deflect it, which is cool. But yeah, GODUS is not only not fulfilled a lot of its promises. A lot of things like the crappy social game mechanics are things that no one was told would be there and no one believed would be there, and now they are. And if you look at the overwhelmingly negative Steam reviews on this game, a lot of it is people saying, this feels like some shitty free-to-play mobile game, except it's not free-to-play. I had to pay for it up front, and it feels like a game that just wants me to constantly click on stuff in aid of not much. And that's not very cool at all. And I think this is where the conundrum is, right? And the similar conundrum to what I had with Double Fine over Broken Age. And Broken Age, since I did that video, a lot more has happened with Double Fine. Broken Age Part 2 is not only still not out, it's nowhere to be seen. Most people really liked Part 1. I thought it was underwhelming. And it does frustrate me when I see Double Fine, ran so far over budget on a game that beat its Kickstarter goal by hundreds and hundreds of %. And they spend a bunch of that money to, hire Elijah Wood to do voice acting. Really terrible voice acting, by the way. I think he was awful in that game. And things like that. And the second part is nowhere to be seen. It was split into 2 parts, which it wasn't supposed to be. And then what they did was Space Base DF9, which was a game they funded in early access and then kicked to the curb and basically went, oh, sorry. Stuff like that is not cool. And I don't really care if you're a creative visionary or not, which someone like Tim Schafer also is. That's not fair to your fans. And they're ultimately the people who make or break you. It doesn't matter what the press says. It doesn't matter even what your publisher says if you have one. Your fans don't buy your game. You don't pay the bills. You don't pay the bills. You don't get to make more games. And I don't want to see people like Peter Molyneux and Tim Schafer, despite some of my very big misgivings about the way they run their businesses, I don't want to see these people lose their means to keep making games. I think they're very good at what they do. I think they largely do make interesting experiences. But there has to be... I would love to live in a world where every game could be produced on whatever timeline it needed, and art could be art without any horrible business constraints around it. But obviously that's not the world we live in. And I think there can be a balance between art and business, and there obviously needs to be one, because games are expensive. Now even small games are expensive to make, and people need to they need to balance the art and the business, because the business is what keeps the art going in this case. And I think these guys are very much tipped towards the art side of the equation. You can look at it as the Molyneux and the Schafers and even the people like the Phil Fishes or whatever are very much balanced on the art side of the equation. And then on the extreme other side, you have the Ubisofts and the Electronic Arts and the Activisions, who are, cranking out their samey yearly sequels every year and everything. They're very much into the business camp. And there is a middle ground. But in this era of where you've got crowdfunding on one side and very risk-averse AAA publishers on the other, it's becoming, like so many other things these days, especially in gaming, it's becoming about extremes, and there's very little middle ground. And the middle ground is where you get the games that make money and deliver on their promises. And this is something that these guys need to figure out. And yeah, where the press does stuff in this equation is tricky, because as I've said before, I think Molyneux has been softballed too much. I think he does need to be called out I think he and Tim Schafer or anyone else need to be called out when they fail to deliver. I think Tim Schafer was not called out at all for failing to properly deliver with Broken Age or indeed Space Base. I think he has way too many friends in the press who didn't take him to task for that, which is a disservice to readers. But at the same time, I think there's a way to question some of what somebody has done without giving them a beating, which is basically what Rock Paper Shotgun did. They went too far the other way. And the term hit piece has become overused with the events of the last few months. The term hit piece has really become twisted to mean anything that criticizes me, which is not what a hit piece is. This almost does read like a hit piece, which is, it really does, especially with that pathological liar question at the very beginning. Because a hit piece is something that starts out with the intent to anger or slander or smear. And when you start your first question off with, are you a pathological liar? I think that's exactly what this is. And this interview goes on for a long time. And to Molyneux's credit, you know, he could have at some point in the interview gone, fuck this, you're being an asshole, I'm out. And he didn't. He stuck around till the end and he answered all the questions as best he could. And I respect that. But at the same time, you know, I've seen several prominent game people on Twitter saying, well, I'm not talking to Rock, Paper, Shotgun anymore. If this is what I can expect. And I don't blame them necessarily. I think this pushed way too hard. I think he easily could have asked everything he did ask of Peter Molyneux and gotten probably very similar responses out of him without calling him a liar. Because being a liar, or especially a pathological liar, implies intent. That implies that Molyneux intended to deceive people. And I don't ever think he did. I said it before, I think he truly believes what he was saying when he talked about, when he overpromised with a lot of his other games. I seriously think he believed that stuff was achievable and was stuff he could do. He wasn't saying that to try to build up pre-orders for his game or something like that. He wasn't purposely saying, you know, this game is going to do all this, and then behind the scenes going, haha, suckers, because he wanted to drive up more sales for his game. No, he believed in what he was saying. I think there are other people in this industry who you could say purposely lied to people and deceived people with intent. I mean, you can look at stuff like the War Z or, you know, Infestation Survivor Stories, I guess is what it's called now, and things like that, where there was literal false advertising in that game, where a game that was out was being advertised with features it doesn't have. That's different. There is nothing I have ever seen or read of Molyneux's quotes in history, and I've seen a lot of it, that would imply to me that he has ever willfully, intently lied to the audience. That doesn't excuse the fact that he's promised things he can't deliver, but I think it's very bold and very frankly out of line to go up to someone in that situation whose history is clearly demonstrated and going, so why are you intentionally fucking with us? That's pretty crass. And I mean, you know, this is Rock, Paper, Shotgun. Rock, Paper, Shotgun, you know, likes to pride itself on its occasional rudeness that it likes to then, you know, balance with, you know, kooky articles that go, oh no, we're really just funny, and aren't we kooky British people? No, sometimes you're just kind of assholes. And that's kind of the way they were here. I think it was good to see Molyneux called to task, but there was a better way to do it. But I hope it makes him think. I don't, like, he's saying that he's going to disappear from the press, which doesn't appear to be the case because he did several interviews afterwards. I don't want to see him disappear from the press. I just hope he learns to not let his mouth run ahead of his brain, and to think about what he's going to say and go, is this something I can actually deliver before he says it? Because I love listening to the man talk. You can see the passion he has when he speaks, and I find that just invigorating. I love any kind of creative person. I love watching a creative person talk passionately about what they do and how much they love it and about the crazy ideas they have. I think that's great, and I really enjoy that. I don't want to see him stop doing that, but he really just needs to rein himself in, because he can still do that without always angering people, and without always overpromising and underdelivering. I think there's a balance there, and I think he just needs to find it. I think to a certain degree that's something Tim Schafer has learned. You know, Double Fine still has a lot of problems right now, but they're not a result of Tim Schafer going out and saying things anymore and then, you know, failing to deliver on them. Double Fine is still failing to deliver on a lot of things, but at least Schafer is keeping himself in check with what he says publicly about those things before they happen. And people now are criticizing Double Fine more than him. Double Fine is an entity, which is probably the way it should be. I think Molyneux can get to that point as well, and I hope he does, because I want to see these guys keep making games. I want to see them keep pushing the creative envelope. and I want to see them make the best things they can within the business constraints they have to live with. But I definitely need, at the same time, if I was a backer of GODUS, I'd be pretty pissed off right now, and I think I would have every right to be, as do the backers. I think they do have a right to be pissed off at what they got, and I hope he learns from that. But yeah, the way Rock Paper Shotgun did it, I think they're just driving a guy underground who doesn't need to be, and they did it just so that they could be edgy and get the clicks and the comments from it. And you know what? They did. It's the same shit that the gaming press has been pulling for years now that I complained about well before recent events happened, which is that, you know, they're being edgy to drive traffic. And if your motivation, you can wrap this back around to their version of creativity too. If your motivation is to drive traffic first and do quality journalism second, then you're not serving your audience any better than Molyneux is serving his. And that's not cool either. So I don't know. But there's been lots of discussion about that, so there's no need to harp on that. So anyway, yeah, this was another fairly long ramble, but I just wanted to talk about that because it's kind of the perspective I share on Peter Molyneux. He's become kind of a fun whipping boy, something that places like Rock, Paper, Shotgun have encouraged. I empathize, or not empathize really, because I'm not in his position, but I sympathize with him to a certain degree, and I think he needs to figure out what he's doing, but at the same time, I want to see him continue to do what he's doing. I just think he needs to talk about it differently, and I do hope this can be the lesson that teaches him that. You know, when he's not dealing with an Electronic Arts executive, he's dealing with his actual fans now. And I'm hoping maybe dealing with his actual fans will give him the humility that he needs in order to do better in the future. So I hope so. Keep making good stuff, Peter. I like it, and I want you to keep doing it. Just, yeah, maybe wait until it's a little closer to done before you talk about it. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. Hopefully this will go up this weekend along with the blog post. We'll see how that goes. There's more stuff coming this week. I did put several videos up on the channel in the last little while, so go check that stuff out if you want. And if you did like what you saw here, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It does help me out a great deal. There's going to be more coming soon, including a retro flashback plays of Star Wars Republic Commando. And I also bought myself, I'll show you this, I also bought myself one of these guys lately, finally too. Going to be a little while. I got to go stock up on cartridges and controllers for this thing, but there is going to be a long-form video review and blog post review of the Retron 5 coming up. It's been out for a while, and I'm very much looking forward to doing that too. So look for that. That should be cool. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, guys. Cheers.